Lithops, living stones. Yet another fascinating group of plants. They look like pebbles and they're very, very well camouflaged in their home environment. I just wonder if you can see there are at least 3 Lithops plants in this pot, one of which has just recently split into 2. This particular variety is called karasmontana from the Karas Mountains in southern Namibia, where it's extremely dry throughout the whole year, and these plants were exposed to tremendous sunshine. As such, they need very little water, and if you give them too much water, they won't survive very long. There's a strong pattern in the water that you give, watering that you should give. They should get no water at all between about November and April, during which time they build up resources in a new pair of leaves. In May and late April and May, they start to burst out of their old leaves, and on this lesliei plant you can see the old leaves stuck to the bottom of the new bodies. I've had this plant now for about 8 years and it's still only 2 bodies. This is another variety of lesliei, again 2 bodies. This particular plant produced beautiful flowers last year for the first time, and I think the reason for that was that I decided to really work on how I was watering the plants. I gave them quite a lot of water in July and August, along with a bit of high potassium fertilizer, and they did flower. Each body will produce a single flower, either white or yellow. These were yellow, and this plant also flowered this year. Last year with a white flower, and it split and produced 2 bodies, as you can see. This variety of Lithops is probably the most common Lithops lesliei, and it covers a large area of South Africa, and it's one of the toughest varieties. If you're going to start growing Lithops, this is one of the varieties I recommend you to start with. That's Lithops lesliei. Here we have another plant that's split this year. I'm not absolutely sure what it is because I bought it as a very young plant. It's either aucampii or hookeri. I'm not sure which, and to be honest with you, the species do seem to merge in with one another sometimes. So it's hard to tell what exactly you've got in your collection. But this is a nice plant. If it is either aucampii or hookeri, it's one of the easiest varieties to grow and can take a lot of water. That's unlike a lot of the varieties. Now this is definitely hookeri, variety hookeri. This is one of my favourite plants. This has grown a huge amount this year. And that's one of the strange things about Lithops plants. Some of them decide to grow really fast, and some of them really seem not to grow much at all. Not sure why that is, but this one is doing really well, and I'm really pleased with it. The way that you can tell Lithops apart is the patterning across the surface. As you can see, this has got a sort of a tessellation pattern, which is fairly typical of the species hookeri. This one, aucampii, is reddish in colour, and there's a variety of this called koelemannii, which is probably, I think, what this variety is. Again, it's got a slightly different patterning on the surface. Lesliei has what's called windows, which let the light through, and this is a particular form of lesliei, and as you can see, the patterning on the surface is totally different from both that species, and for that matter, from this one. And this one, the karasmontana, all these varieties are sort of pale grey and yellowish in colour, which show them how different they are from the other species. Okay, well, I'm hoping that all of these plants will flower this year, but I never count on it. They seem to take their own time as to when they produce flowers, but I think the way to do it is to give them good watering and feeding in August and September to give them the energy and food that they need to produce quite large flowers for the size of the body. Now, one of the things I wanted you to do in this video is show you some Lithops books. And I plan to do this with most of, or many of the plants that I make presentations about. This is a really excellent book and one of the standard books that you should try and get hold of if you're interested in growing Lithops. It's by Stephen Hammer and it was published in 1999, so it's really an old book now. There was another reprint in the year 2000, which is quite expensive, but the pictures of the plants and the guidance on growing them is really good. So I would highly recommend this book to you, if you can get hold of it. You might be able to get hold of it on Amazon, but it will always be as an old book rather than a new one, and the prices might be inflated. Anyway, it's worth having. I'm glad I got it all those 20 years ago. Here's a more recent book, Lithops Flowering Stones. This is a tremendously good book as well, a lot cheaper, by the German Bernd Schlosser. Now, Bernd has actually produced a lower priced book by not having all the colour illustrations in it, but he gives excellent guidelines on cultivation, particularly watering, and I think this is what helped me get my watering sorted out last year for some of the plants that I had been growing. So just to go back to the plants, there they go. I'm going to move them back into the sun in a minute. I put them here because I can line things nicely up to show what they look like and get close to them. Hope you found this interesting. Please leave a comment or any questions that you may have, and subscribe if you like this channel. Thank you.